Get 6 months of local news for just $2. You get unlimited access to the news and information you need to stay connected to your community. Visit inforum.com/subscribe to get 6 months of local news for just $2.
You're listening to Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. I'm your host, Rob Port. If I sound distracted, it's because I've been busy covering this story all morning. I'm joined by my co-host, Chad Oban.
He's right of center, I'm left of center, both sides of the political spectrum.
I think it's cathartic. I think it's a necessary and proper debate. I'm glad we're having it.
And honestly, we have to do better.
Okay, I don't know why I'm getting blamed for this, right? Artificial intelligence has become a big subject of debate in North Dakota. And it's a little bit different than the national debate we're having over AI, right? I mean, there's, people are worried, how does it fit into an academic setting? What's the ethical way to use this? What does it mean for our politics when, maybe the zone of public debate can be flooded with AI-generated content that may not be entirely accurate? But for North Dakota specifically, we're having a debate about infrastructure that supports AI, because AI does a lot of positive things too. It's a lot of great. I've said before, we use AI to help produce this show in some small ways. It's a great tool, and like it or not, it's coming. And people who provide the infrastructure for AI, which is specifically the data centers where a lot of the computing behind that service is done, they see North Dakota as a good place to invest. Applied Digital specifically has a facility already built in Ellendale, and by all reports, obviously that was an arduous process, as you would expect a large facility like that to be. But by all reports, the locals seem happy. There were some growing pains, but they're happy. They're happy it happened. Now in Harwood, just north of Fargo, Applied Digital is working on building another data center. It's about a $3 billion investment. And it's received some pushback. There's people who are concerned about that it could drive up utility prices. People are concerned about things like sound. People are concerned about things like traffic during construction. And so to talk about some of that is Wes Cummins. He is the CEO of Applied Digital. He agreed to come on the Plain Talk podcast and take some of our questions about this. Wes, first of all, thank you. And second of all, I want to get right to something that did bother me a little bit, I guess as a member of the news media, was some non-disclosure agreements that your company had local officials in Fargo and Harwood sign. And I'm pretty sure you also had officials in Ellendale sign these as well. In some ways, I know that these NDAs are not untypical, especially when we're talking about industrial or business development. But I mean, it raised a lot of eyebrows and it raised a lot of concern when we hear our public officials who serve us, the public, are signing these NDAs. So talk to us a little bit about them. Why were they necessary? What did they cover?
Yeah, so on the NDAs, for us, it's common practice, but there's two primary purposes for the NDAs, and the what I will say is there is no purpose to keep information away from the public that they need to have to be informed, to know what's going on. These are typically things that we do prior to us launching a project or doing a project. And there's the first purpose, Rob, is we are a publicly traded company. We need to have people understand that some of this information could be deemed material non-public information from an SEC purpose. And we don't want someone getting in trouble trading in our shares in front of what may be a big, stock moving announcement and our stock did actually move when we announced the deal in Harwood. So this is for protection, primarily for the people that we give this information to. And they don't tell, if you just walk through this, we have the mayor and he's not steeped in public company rules and regulations. And he tells a couple of, his friends or people that work around it or people that he's close with that, this big new project could be coming. And then they go and find our company and they say, you know what, this is interesting. Maybe I'll buy their stock. And then you have this issue of potentially violations and insider trading laws. So that's one, is to protect the people that we're giving this information to. And then two, from a company perspective, one of the big parts is protecting ourselves and our competitive information, not in the instance that we go forward with a project, but really in the instance that we don't go forward with a project, because there's projects where we have talked to people about that we have not moved forward with. But if we give them a lot of information, we let them tour our facilities, see how it is that we build our buildings, what we do, some of that information might be competitively sensitive to us. And it's important that it isn't shared if we decide to not go through with the project, right? And in the instance of Harwood, this came together pretty quickly. We've been speaking to Minn Kota for a long time about it on the utility side, because we spend a lot of time around the country working on the power utility side, because there's a few kind of key ingredients that determine where we locate these, and power being the most important one. So that was going on for quite a while, and then it started to come together. As it came together, as we looked at where it would work, we looked at a couple of locations, a couple of pieces of property, and so we asked a few people to sign NDAs and have a discussion about it and see what it is that we do and see if it was even a possibility. Because if we're just if it's just kind of a no out of the gate, we've had those, we just move on. But at least we can. Doesn't mean that they won't share that information that we gave them, but at least we have, some legal recourse on sharing that information. But our policy, and I think you've seen it with us in the state in the past, is we like to be as transparent as possible, but there's certain things that we need to protect. And some of those things are, people from getting in trouble from laws that maybe they're not familiar with. But that's why we do that. But once we had decided to move forward, it was very, shortly thereafter, we held that town hall. A lot of these deals, if you look around the country, the first time residents hear about it is it shows up on the docket for their local zoning commission, and then they're trying to figure out what it is. Instead, we went out, we gave the information publicly once we had decided to go forward with it, and then we held the town hall, and we took all questions, whether they were positive or people that don't like the project. But we really work hard in the state and just overall as a company to do this transparently, because these projects, we think have a really positive impact, but they're definitely impactful, and we want people to understand what's going on.
So, Wes, thanks for coming on. I think we live at a time where any sort of change, people are automatically often opposed to. I mean, we've seen it with pipelines, we've seen it with the tribal casinos up in Grand Forks County, and so I appreciate the transparency you're providing. But I think sometimes what gets lost is what you're actually trying to accomplish, right? I mean, sometimes it's just like the public comment period, just, the mayor's corrupt or whatever. But can you just talk through what will this facility do? How many jobs will it mean to the community? And sort of, from your perspective, what is the upside to Cass County, to Fargo, to Harwood if this thing gets built?
Absolutely. So as Rob started with, AI, controversial topic, I boil AI down fairly simply. There's a piece here where it's probably, and I'll say probably, but I think very strongly, it's by far the most important race we've been in the world. And there's, in my opinion, there's two countries that are racing forward to advance AI, to reach super intelligence, to reach AGI, and it's the United States and it's China. And this is going forward one way, or another. And we're in a race in the U.S. And for Applied Digital, we want to provide that infrastructure inside of the United States for this purpose, and for the U.S. to really advance their AI initiatives and be the leader. And then AI overall, my opinion is that it's the most equalizing technology, the most equalizing thing, period, in the history of the human race. And when I was a kid, I used to watch the Reading Rainbow, and the thing was always that knowledge is power, right? And you hear that the jingle and the mantra, but this is, if you've used any of the tools, like you use ChatGPT 5 right now, it provides you with PhD level expertise in any field you want. anything you want. Everyone has true knowledge at their fingertips. And so it's a very equalizing technology in the fact that you have all of the knowledge you need on almost any subject. And so in general, I think there's a lot of benefits. Of course, there's a lot of pitfalls. But when we think about us building our infrastructure, when we think about North Dakota specifically, so these facilities are different than any other data center. North Dakota has not been a place for data center. Applied Digital actually has brought that to North Dakota because we had a vision back actually in 22. I sat in front of Bank of North Dakota and PSC and talked about how I think North Dakota can be an epicenter for AI. And why is that? These facilities require a significant amount of power and they require a lot of cooling. North Dakota has both of those in spades. They have not been a data center location because they're not close to population centers, right? And all the data centers we build for TikTok and video streaming and every video application we have, Netflix, that's mostly been in population centers. So those population centers have seen data center. But when I look at North Dakota, this workload can move to places where latency is not, it's not as latency sensitive. So it can move to places like North Dakota. And then this opportunity, okay, so North Dakota has power. North Dakota produces 6 times the amount of energy that they use inside of the state. And that includes all energy, but also North Dakota produces over double the amount of electricity that they use in the state. So North Dakota is a huge energy exporter. And what that means is neighboring states create industry based on North Dakota power. So what's going on in Minnesota? What's going on in Des Moines, Iowa, where Microsoft has a big location? What's going on in Omaha, Nebraska, where Google has a big data center location? You're exporting power out of the state of North Dakota for other places to build data centers. And these data centers, they create jobs. They don't create, necessarily a huge amount versus the amount of power they use. But like our facility in Harwood will create 200 to 300 full-time jobs. What we've done in Ellendale is what we plan to do in Harwood. We train a lot of local people, the skill set to go and work in these facilities, and they pay, our wage is significantly higher than the standard wage, the average wage in North Dakota. So these have a lot of, high double digit, low single digit, high double digit, low triple digit, paying jobs that in some cases, jobs that go well into the $200,000 and $300,000 range. And we work really hard to hire that locally. We spend a lot, this is a $3 billion building. And then the customer that we expect to have in this building will spend about 2.5 to 3 times that on equipment that goes inside of the building, the GPUs and the servers that work to produce the generative AI. And so what that means is, more high paying jobs, skilled labor, being on the leading edge of technology, and then of course property tax. So you get all of these economic benefits. And when you have a town like Harwood and like Ellendale, these towns struggle to maintain their sewer systems, to maintain their water, to maintain basic infrastructure. You're dealing in a town of 800 people. In Ellendale, it's 1,100 people. I had a chance to speak with the mayor there last night, and everything that they did in that town, they have to fix a road. Guess what? Special assessment. They need to do something for the sewer. Guess what? Special assessment. And so a project like this is going to create a very large amount of tax revenue for the town and then for the school district and for everything involved. And so it provides that benefits on top of the job, which is skilled labor benefits or skilled labor positions that are high paying. And what I say to a lot of people who agree with me in North Dakota is, why would you export your energy produced inside of your state to neighboring states for their economic benefit when you can just use it right here for your own economic benefit? And that's really the opportunity that we're creating in North Dakota.
I find all that very compelling, to be honest with you. And not least because, if we're being honest, a lot of the energy that North Dakota exports, increasingly is becoming politically fraught. Minnesota's passed laws where they don't want some of our energy that we produce through coal power, for instance. So the idea of creating demand for North Dakota energy inside North Dakota energy, in my mind, creates synergy with our existing industries. Like, I like the idea of diversifying from ag and energy, as important as those are. I like the idea of doing other things too. This is another thing we can do, but also there's symbiosis with the energy industry in that we're creating demand for it. So that's great. I think probably the most common thing when I talk about these data centers in North Dakota, the most common concern I hear from people is the impact on utility prices, because that's something that could be felt, across the region, across the state, potentially. I mean, most of the, sound, things like that, that's in Harwood. I don't live in Harwood. Why do I care about that? Well, I sure care if my electricity bill goes up. These data centers use an enormous amount of electricity. I mean, multiples of what, a given it's like adding a whole nother city or even multiple cities to our power grid. So I understand, the argument has been made that this is, and we're hearing it from your partners in the utility space. We're hearing it from you that this is not going to increase. In fact, we just had a regulator on last week, Sherry Haugen-Hofford, who also said, this isn't going to increase. I think people are just having a difficult time understanding how could we add so much power consumption to our grid with the laws of supply and demand. How can we add so much power consumption without prices going up?
Yeah, it's a great question. So let me hit a couple of these things. So if North Dakota was a power importer, then I think you have cause for a lot more concern. So when you're a net power exporter and you start using power inside of your state, you just export less power. And so the power is already abundant. If you're a net power importer, like I said, it should be a lot more concerned about it. But if you can utilize the infrastructure inside of the state, inside of your own utility, then that utility makes money because utilities are infrastructure-based businesses, right? They get a yield on their assets that they deploy. So if they have infrastructure that's not being used and it gets better utilization, the best explanation is if you built a big water pipe somewhere and someone was only using a tiny trickle through that water pipe, it's not going to be a very economic pipe. But if you can fill it up completely with usage, then it's going to be a lot more economical. So let me just give the example of what we have seen in Ellendale. We've been running at 200 megawatts in Ellendale for the last couple of years. We located next to power infrastructure. That's the most important thing for us. And so a substation that went unutilized, a significant amount of the time, a lot of surplus wind power fed into the substation, maybe couldn't be transported out. And so with us adding 200 megawatts of load in Ellendale for the last 2 years, we have saved the MDU ratepayers $3.5 million in 2023 that was dispersed back to the ratepayers, and $5.7 million, I believe, in 2024. So we have 2 years of record of utilizing the infrastructure that's there. The utility makes more money and then shares that money back with its customers. Not completely. Obviously, utilities are businesses that make money as well. But if you utilize the infrastructure, again, inside of your state where you already have an abundance of power, what we have seen is power prices actually go down for residents and not up. Again, if you were in a state that imports power and you have a power shortage already and you're trying to use more power, you're probably going to see your prices go up.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying. So you're saying we had in Allendale specifically, we had the capacity, but it wasn't necessarily being used.
Correct.
But yet the utility companies had to pay to maintain that capacity. So it's like if I own a big grocery store, but I only have enough customers to open a couple of aisles, I still have to pay to keep that entire big store open. You're coming in and saying, hey, more customers, you can open up more aisles. Now that money you're spending anyway to maintain all this has a use that's producing something that's being used by a customer. Does that now?
That's correct.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
That's specifically what we have seen in Ellendale, and you can look.
And do you expect that to also be the case in Harwood?
So in Harwood, you can never guarantee that these things happen. It's the experience we've had, but we're using existing infrastructure. And the other thing, Rob, that it creates, so these are long-term deals that we're doing, right? So we're building 30 to 50-year assets. We sign, initial leases on these with very large companies for 15 years. It not only utilizes the infrastructure, but it allows a lot of certainty in planning for growth. So if you're expecting population growth or industry growth in an area, to be able to have a certainty around a load that you can plan to, for the future, that makes a big difference because utilities it's really difficult. It's really impossible for them to build new generation, for example, on spec. And so to have these big, steady long-term commitments in an area really help from a utility perspective to be able to plan for growth and plan for additional capacity. And so that's one of the other benefits that we bring besides just utilizing the current infrastructure more efficiently.
Wes, I think, Rob's up in Minot. I'm in Bismarck. We're hundreds of miles away from Harwood. To me, this is a no-brainer, right? I mean, we should absolutely do this, but I'm not really affected by it. It's all upside for me as a taxpayer in Bismarck, North Dakota. An aunt and uncle who live in Harwood, I have no idea how they feel about this thing. But obviously, the decisions that are being made affect individual people. And it's often in these small towns, individual people who like the way things are. Yep. And so, I guess my question for you referenced earlier, you're a publicly traded company. You're the CEO. It's easy for somebody living across the street from where this facility is being built to think Wes doesn't care about me at all. This is just about what it means for the shareholders, that kind of thing. How do you alleviate some of those sort of NIMBY concerns from people? Because I guarantee the people in Harwood would love this thing if maybe it was 100 miles away. Sure. But how do you alleviate those concerns?
Sure. So the way I think about these, and I do care about how it impacts, and we really try hard to go about this all the right way as far as impact on the people that are right there because they're the most impacted. And there's certain things that they're going to be a nuisance for a little while because large construction, you're going to have trucks. Right. We're going to do everything we can on routing these. We had this discussion actually last night at the meeting, so that we can have the lowest impact we can have. But when I look at these facilities. And just my background, by the way, is I grew up in a town of 200 people in Idaho. I grew up on a potato farm, and one of the biggest points of pride for me is, either you were going to farm, or a lot of family farms kind of went away in Idaho, and so you parents tell you do good in school, go to college, so that you can go do a job somewhere else. And for me, as I grew up, tech was just starting and wanted to do tech, and tech was done in Silicon Valley, and that was it. And so for me to be able to bring the leading edge of technology back to towns like I grew up in, that would have never, even 5 years ago, but especially when I grew up, these opportunities for leading edge tech were not even a thought. It was never a possibility. So that's one big point of pride, but also making these from an impact perspective on the people, the lowest impact you can possibly make. So we build, what looks like a warehouse building. Noise is, and there is talk about noise. There is some noise, but it's very, it's really manageable, low grade noise. The biggest noise creator on our site are chillers, which a chiller is a larger size version of your heat pump that sits outside your house. And so you have a fan on your heat pump, exactly what that sounds like when that turns on. And so that's the primary noise piece of our sites. But for the most part, you won't really even know outside of, you can see it, that these sites even exist. It's sitting inside of 8-inch concrete walls. You're not going to hear servers whirring or EMF or those types of items that people would be concerned about. But the goal is to have the absolute lowest visible and audio impact that we can have. And these projects bring that more than any other project I know. And for Harwood, it does need to be a certain distance from the town for it to be in the town, and for the town to get the benefits from a tax perspective and an economic perspective. So it's balancing those two things, but absolutely do care about who's next door. We try to figure out these sites so that we have the lowest impact on neighbors. When we do the sites, like we have a site in Allendale, we've put a sound wall up on, we have Bitcoin mining in Allendale as well, which does create more noise than these facilities will, but we put a sound wall up so that we can protect the neighbors from it. But, and the facilities, my opinion, look pretty cool. I don't think they're an eyesore in any way. But we do try to make it as low as impact as possible with the maximum economic benefit impact that these kind of facilities can have on these locations.
One, I think last question is maybe about how your business works, because that's something, I think North Dakotans, we understand how agriculture works. We understand how energy works, familiar with these industries. Yours is new. And so maybe it's helpful for people to understand. I guess my understanding, you can correct me if I'm wrong, you guys build a data center and then you basically contract out that capacity to companies that want to do computing. And I mean, obviously all the big names come to mind, Google and whatnot, ChatGPT. I don't know. I don't know who your customers are. Maybe you can tell them if you're allowed to. But is that how it works? Like, you build this center, we have this capacity, and then you go about selling the capacity to people who want to use it.
Yeah, so we build the data center, and if you look inside a data center, and people locally are going to be able to see it, and we'll give tours, and there's some really cool spots as you go through this, right? You have this massive concrete shell, and that's a pretty cool stage of the data center. It's this massive empty hall of a building, and then it gets built up. And you put a huge amount of electrical gear, because data centers require this crazy amount of redundancy, right? Five nines reliability. So it can be down like 23 seconds a month inside of these. So it has a huge amount of redundancy built in, cooling, and all of these, go outside of the heat pumps go inside of the facility. And so what we do is we build this really redundant, hardened facility, and then we lease it to a customer on a long-term lease. And you're right. I say publicly all the time, the companies that we focus on are Microsoft, Google, Meta, Amazon, Oracle. CoreWeave's our customer, and Ellendale. So hyperscale computing providers. And then we typically go for 15-year lease that's fixed, and then there's typically 2 to 3 5-year renewals on those. But these are long-lived assets, and then our job is to operate that facility at extremely high reliability for our customer who's leased it from us, to put their computing inside of the facility and run that computing for customers outside, that could be almost anywhere in the U.S.
So Rob said last question, but I'm going to get one other in. So if this thing gets approved tomorrow, which obviously it won't, but what's the timeline to being fully funded? Is it a couple of years, 2-3 years? What's the timeline?
So for this building, depending on when we get to start, it's about 18 months to be fully online. So you have 18 months of construction. There's a, and inside that construction, there's some busier times and some slower times. So there's when you're putting the prefab, the walls up, when the building's going up, you're going to get more traffic as all of these. So these walls are precast, concrete precast off-site, trucked in, panels that just get tilted up. So you're going to have that portion. And then it turns into, people showing up on site, but you just have an army of electricians and plumbers inside the building. And so that, generally creates a lot less traffic around the facility, and you just have people working. And, the goal here is we would love for it to move forward, because you guys live in North Dakota. It sure is a lot easier to put foundations in the ground and tilt buildings up before winter. And then the people that work on site, they sure like it a lot better if they're inside, doing work for the winter versus outside.
Yeah, absolutely. And then just circling back to the NDA thing, again, living in the environment that we do, where it's very low trust, which is not Applied Digital's fault. That's just the world we're all living in. Do you think there's a better approach maybe to the NDA thing, where it doesn't, because I think people read it and like, well, why are public officials signing this? What are they hiding? I mean, they're already accusing you of hiding things, right? I mean, and I think a lot of that's baseless. I don't, but people are already saying, oh, they're bought and paid for, they're selling us out, they're hiding everything. And then we hear about the NDAs and it creates a problem. Is there a better way to handle that maybe?
So look, we do live in a world, Rob, where, there's a certain, there's like, no matter what you do, there's going to be people that don't like it. Right. And then they're going to grasp at things to say, this is, bought and paid for. I appreciated the mayor and the city council last night. Like, I don't think these guys get paid really anything. They're elected officials. You're in a town.
No, they do not.
Whenever they get paid, it's not enough.
And I truly don't even know if they get paid at all. And obviously we run everything transparent and above board. We're not paying people off. These people are making decisions for their own families as well. And the NDA, like I said, it's pretty, in my opinion, benign, and it's really put in place to protect people really on their side, right? I was explaining the insider trading issue, these types of things that are laws that most people like, if I went to, you and Chad, and maybe you guys would know these things and say, man, I shouldn't do this because I know this information. 99.9% of Americans are not going to know that that's a problem. And so, you go through this to protect people on their side. And then obviously we need to protect some of our information, like I said, mostly and almost completely if a project isn't going forward, right? Like we've had those where we go and look and it's just not going to work out. And that way we don't have a bunch of our own information leaking around everywhere with our, for our competitors to get, because we are running a business. We do have competition. So the answer is I would love to find a way that it gives the same protection, because, a lot of the people who want to yell about, that they're bought and paid for, or we're trying to hide something, would be even happier if one of these guys got in trouble for a simple misstep on something that they didn't know about. And I definitely want to make sure that we protect people as much as we can from those types of things happening. So it's definitely food for thought for us and things that we're thinking about in the future. We're always, I'm a big sports person, so I'm like a big continuous improvement. We can always improve what we're doing. I think, we've improved from what we did in Ellendale to what we're doing in Harwood, or what we hope to do in Harwood. So there's always continuous improvement, but I do think that regardless of the NDA, people are going to find something to poke at for sure. And the NDA is just, it sounds big and scary, and it's really not. It was really more for the protection of the people that we were telling the information to, so that they didn't get in trouble. So that it's really as simple as that. But definitely always room for improvement.
Wes, you said you're a big sports guy. Yankees or Dodgers?
I'm gonna go Yankees, and it's not because of Rob's hat.
Jesus.
But my dad is an absolute diehard Yankees fan. I think he's the only person I know. He still lives in Idaho. Now, but my dad would kill me if I came on and said Dodgers. I lived in LA for a little while, and I went to quite a few Dodgers games. But my dad's one of the few people I know. He lives in Idaho, in the house we grew up in, and he's got like the MLB ticket. I don't even know who buys that on DirecTV.
Not on DirecTV.
I buy the streaming service.
Yeah. He hasn't figured out the streaming part yet, but he watches every single game.
Well, Wes, we said last question, and then in proud Plain Talk tradition, we asked like 5 more questions. So I really appreciate you making time for us.
Absolutely. Anytime. Appreciate you having me.
Hey, Plain Talk listeners, have something to say? Call or text Plain Talk with your questions, comments, or headlines you want us to cover.
Just dial 701-587-3141. Leave us your message or shoot us a text with your name and location, and you could be featured on an upcoming show.
Hi, my name is Ashley, and I am in Jamestown.
Hey, Rob and Chad. My name's Tony. I live in Grand Forks.
That's 701-587-3141.
Call us, text us, vent, praise.
We want you in the conversation. Thanks for being part of the show.
Now let's get back to today's episode.
Welcome back. Just finished up with Wes Cummins. He's the CEO of Applied Digital. Was so happy to get him on the show. We actually got upgraded. We were going to have their executive vice president of public affairs or something, Nick Phillips. I'm sure he would have been great. But then we got upgraded. We got the CEO on. Which is good. Chad, going into that interview, the NDAs were the big thing for me. It's no secret. I'm generally supportive of it, optimistic about it. I mean, obviously, if there's pitfalls or other problems that along the way, I'm open to the idea that this project isn't perfect, but they got a pretty good track record. Ellendale seems to have gone fine. The NDA things bothered me, and I think the strategy there is just because his justifications for the NDAs make a lot of sense. I think the thing is be transparent about the NDAs. Just be forthright. Like, listen, we're going to have some local officials sign some NDAs in the interim here while we're working things up. And there's got to be a way to just be transparent about it and just, signal the fact this is why we do this. This is why, this is who we had sign them, so that people aren't blindsided by it mid-debate.
Yeah. Here's my biggest concern going into this was the utility prices. he did a fantastic job of explaining that with the help of your grocery store analogy of what this looks like. And it's sort of what you said last week, where that's what you thought was sort of going on, right? We're producing this stuff, or have the capacity to produce
we produce a lot of electrons.
Yeah, I thought that was a really good explanation. I thought he did a good job there. And I think the other thing that's interesting is North Dakotans are generally a little bit concerned when a company comes in and, it's all this great stuff and, trust us, everything's going to be fine. One, they've got the Ellendale track record, which I think helps them. But I think him telling the story about growing up in a town of 200 people in Idaho, sort of validates that this is, I know you people. I know you folks. You're just like my neighbors on the potato farm in Idaho. I think that helps as well. Here's the deal. Wes is really good at explaining this stuff. And if I just listened to him, and even if I was a neighbor in Harwood, I'd be like, this makes a lot of sense for my community.
Well, I think when you stack that up, what he's saying, it's all rational explanations. Now, at a certain point of this, you just got to trust. I mean, he could be, I don't know. And I mean, let's be honest, the bottom could fall out of the AI market. You've been hearing that scary word bubble around the AI thing with, NVIDIA's stock prices. And I don't know if people are following that, but the chipsets, and people have been worried, is there a bubble around AI? I mean, I don't know. And if there is a bubble, maybe it impacts facilities like this, but that's a separate thing from, coming in and doing something in bad faith. This is not a fly-by-night outfit. And I think early on, when we first started hearing about data centers, and a lot of the chief justification for them was like Bitcoin mining and stuff. And I think people saw it as sketchy.
Yeah. Well, listen, we saw firsthand some of the folks that came into North Dakota to set some of these things up had some pretty sketchy backgrounds. These guys don't. These guys have done this before. I spent some time watching interviews with Wes before this interview on CNNBC and other places. This is a legitimate company. I also like that he didn't overpromise. I mean, he said, this is our experience in Ellendale with utility prices. We expect the same thing to happen in Harwood, but you don't really know for sure until you're in it.
Well, and it also, I mean, it demonstrates the fact that utility prices aren't really in their control. They're a customer. Like, right. Now they're a massive customer.
Yeah.
Arguably, probably I would have to think the largest customers in the state. I'm trying to think of another industry or facility that sucks that kind of power. I mean, even the manufacturing plants like in Gwinner or whatever, I just don't think are pulling that kind of power. So, I mean, it's remarkable. But even that, I mean, they can't control the power markets. But I think the thing is, we know that North Dakota produces a lot of power. If we could, and we don't have a way to store that power, which is the conundrum of when you're producing power at scale. You can't store the power you made, like you can with a soybean crop or something. You could store it somewhere and wait for crop prices, and sort of enter the market that way. We can't do that with power. We have to use it as we produce it. And so this is a way. It's in North Dakota. It's a North Dakota destination for North Dakota produced power. That's a good thing.
And in Ellendale, they're using excess wind power. I mean, that was fascinating to me. I know there's a wind farm down there, so it should be probably no kidding, but it's all of the above.
It would be interesting to get somebody on who's in charge of sort of dispatching, because I think that would be a fascinating conversation about, right? I mean, the great thing about coal power is that it's steady.
Yep.
Steady
base.
The problem with wind is it's intermittent. So how can we make these things work together? Do these facilities help? Right. And I would like to know, because if it can be a boon to the wind industry as well and help even out some of that intermittency, maybe it can, maybe I'm fantasizing here, but I think that's really interesting.
I also thought, by him naming specific data centers in Omaha and Des Moines and Minnesota where they're using our power, that's a good talking point. That is compelling.
Well, even just this idea that other states build not just data centers, but build industry
based on us.
To power. That's really, and what's one thing we've been arguing about, I mean, for as long, in the nearly 3 decades now that I've been writing about North Dakota politics, what are we always talking about is how to add that value to the things that North Dakota produces and do it in the state. Value added agriculture. Can we build? We're talking about building a soybean crushing facility. That's because we want to make money from growing the soybeans and also from the process of turning the soybeans into other products. Well, I mean, this is kind of that same argument that we have been striving for so long.
Yeah, you mentioned value-added agriculture, so I'm going to just mention I was at a little place called Cows & Co., which is a dairy in Carrington, North Dakota, that sells gelato and cheeses, and it's a value-added. Everybody should go there. They serve lunch, best cheese curds I've ever had in my life. Carrington, North Dakota, Cows & Co.
Carrington, by the way, should we just, you and I are going to be on the Carrington Convention and Visitors. Yeah. Carrington's a wonderful, I drive through Carrington all the time when I go down to Fargo. Every time I drive through it, I think I could live in Carrington.
Well, stop at Cows & Co. the next time you're going through. It's outside of town. It's awesome.
Usually if we stop anywhere, it's at the Chieftain to get a French dip or something like that.
Sure.
Great.
Yeah. But I think that when he was talking about the jobs as well, he's not talking about minimum wage jobs here. He was talking about, I'm ready to move to Harwood and pick up one of these, a couple $100,000 jobs that he's selling there. So, I mean, again, when we want young professionals on the cutting edge to stay in North Dakota, it seems like this type of thing is something that, and we have to get, I mean, I couldn't help but think about when I was reading the paper this morning in Grand Forks, the mayor of Grand Forks completely shut down the idea of the tribal casino until the legislature.
For now.
Yeah, for now. But basically said until the legislature has a change of heart. That, the pipelines, it is just like any sort of change right now we are just opposed to, or there's a group of people who are opposed to. And I'm also, and I wanted to ask him this, and maybe you know this, was there an uproar around the Ellendale facility when it was opened up?
It was muted. Yeah, it was there. I mean, there were people who didn't like it, but they went through the process. And I think part of what's going on with some of this is, if I could be critical of my own industry a little bit, like for instance, the reporting on the Harwood meeting. All of a sudden, because we've had a couple of meetings with some hot tempers there, all of a sudden it's become controversial. That's the appellation that we're putting on this, is controversial. Was it really? I mean, or is it just because some people showed up and are super active on social media and showed up and got kind of that tyranny of small rooms thing that I wrote about a week or so ago? I think a lot of that is what's going on, where you get a project like this and the negativity gets amplified, even if the negativity is a minority, because, everybody has the tools of social media. It's people who are passionate are going to engage, and the opponents are just going to be more passionate about this probably than most of the supporters. Right. I mean, the people who have a problem are going to speak up, and the people who are fine with it are mostly going to okay, fine, whatever. And they're not going to go to the mattresses on Facebook to try to make something happen. So I think that it creates sort of a distortion field around things like this, whether it's the Harwood thing, whether it's a carbon pipeline, whatever it is. I wonder how much of it is authentic and how much of it is smoke.
Yeah, the other thing that I thought was sort of interesting in reading the article about last night's meeting was, Fargo trying to annex that chunk of land might actually get the people of Harwood to support this thing, because they're saying, hey, if Fargo wants it so bad, it must be a good deal. Let's build this thing today.
I feel like the political analysis in both of our minds kind of saw that. And we were like, good play. Find a common enemy. Who does everybody hate? Fargo.
Yep. No, and I think somebody said it in one of the articles that basically, if Fargo wants it so bad, it must be a good deal.
Yeah. Coming for it.
What a move by Fargo too, to just be like, oh, by the way, maybe we'll annex this chunk of land all of a sudden.
It's they're trying to find more revenue so they could pay out their bloated communications department.
I'm not touching that one.
You got a $7 million budget deficit. They're gonna fix it by taking Harwood's data center. I mean, yeah, Fargo. And the thing is, I do roll my eyes because Fargo is a wonderful community. I don't have anything against Fargo, But there are times where Fargo's city leaders live in a bubble and they don't understand the degree to which they earn some of that enmity by doing stuff like this. So I don't know. I feel like they should just leave the project to be Harwood. Fargo doesn't need to grab this. Let Harwood be Harwood.
It is fun. I was at a concert at Blue Stem in Moorhead on Saturday, and the opening act for the Avett Brothers made some comment about being in Fargo.
Did you went to the Avett Brothers concert? Man,
second time I've seen them at Blue Stem. Go to Blue Stem. It is such a great place.
All right.
But the opening act made some reference to being in Fargo, and they heard about it from me since we were in Moorhead when that happened. I also should mention I spent some time in West Fargo and watched the Legacy High School football team beat the number 1 rated Cheyenne West Fargo. I don't even know what their nickname is. I mean, back in the day, they just had the one high school in West Fargo. Now they got 3. It's hard to keep track.
So is the Packers. West
Fargo.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. I feel like it's a good facility. I feel like we're moving in the right direction. But again, and I really want to drill down on this a little bit, that any project like this is going to require some trust. Like you're going to have, we can't verify everything. You just kind of have to trust that Applied Digital is going to follow through on some of the things they're saying. Now, the nice thing about that is we can go and look at Applied Digital's track record. Publicly traded company. North Dakota's hardly the only state they're doing business in. I know you probably searched. I don't see any evidence where they've pulled the rug out or, have been a fly-by-night or have come in and made a bunch of promises and didn't follow through on them. They seem just like a normal American business that's trying to expand, and they're going through a process that is arduous for a lot of good reasons too, by the way. I don't mind subjecting these things to public scrutiny and everything else. I just think it's really interesting. But I mean, at some point, you just have to trust. And we are not living in an environment right now where the public is primed to trust anybody. Really.
Yeah, and I think these guys, they have tough jobs, right? I mean, if you're the folks from Applied Digital and you're coming out to these communities, and I sense they want to help this community, right? I mean, they see the upside for Harwood, and then you go in and there's people like, accusing you of being all these terrible things and paying off elected officials and whatever. I think it'd be very hard to sort of keep your cool and not just say, listen, people, I'm trying to help you. Stop finding a boogeyman around every corner. This is a good deal for you.
Especially the people in bad faith.
Right.
People are calling you a criminal, or people saying, oh, the fix is in and you're paying everybody off with no basis, which is, and it becomes sort of asymmetrical warfare, because nobody is if Applied Digital says something and then it turns out not to be true, they're going to be put through the ringer for it. Right. Some rando on Facebook who shows up and gets their name in the paper for a hot minute, or they're screaming and hollering, makes the headline. If their accusations of malfeasance or criminal behavior or payoffs or anything else turns out to be true, nobody holds them accountable. Right. Because nobody can. They're just some rando in the public. They're not. And so it's really hard, where Applied Digital is and should be very, very accountable in a high profile way for the things they say and do. But the people who accuse them of things are not. That's the world we're living in. And it's hard. It's hard to navigate.
Yeah. And I think that Applied Digital needs to make sure they don't come in and they can't be too slick, because North Dakotans aren't going to like that. They need to be, present. They can't be flippant. And I couldn't do what they do.
Well, putting their CEO is doing a pretty good job. I mean, putting him in a room and letting him explain this to people, I think reasonable people are gonna be one of them. And there's some people, maybe just if I lived, across the street from the facility, maybe I'd never like it. Right. And I don't know what to do about that. I don't know what to do about NIMBY attitudes. I mean, can we help? Do we hold up progress because a couple of people don't want to look across the street at this facility? That's a tough.
I mean, part of the problem here is building in Ellendale these Harwood, these people want to live in a small town, right? They don't want to be around a bunch of, and that's why you live in a small town. And so I think you do have some natural sort of adversarial relationships. But again, I think this is good for our state for sure, likely good for their community in Cass County.
Were you surprised by the job number? Because everything, usually the knock I hear is that, you know, they don't actually produce that many jobs because they're a data center. So that it's not like people are like a manufacturing job where there's just really labor intensive. And that, you know, then people talk about construction. Well, the construction only lasts for so long, and that's not really something you count on. But 200 to 300 jobs is 200 to 300 full-time jobs is what he said.
High paying
jobs.
200 to 300. That's legitimate. Maybe it's not a big deal in Des Moines or Omaha, but 200 to 300 jobs in rural North Dakota, it's a big deal.
200 to 300 jobs, even in Fargo.
It's a big deal. Yep.
It's a big deal. That's not a small employer. And then you think of the ripple effect of all the other jobs that those jobs create, where now you've got people here, they're making $100,000, $150,000.
Are we giving them property tax abatements to move here?
I don't know.
No.
I don't know if they're getting any abatements or not.
I haven't heard anything.
I haven't heard a word.
Sort of a joke, you know, when you think about Fargo and Cass County and giving tax.
Who specifically talk? I mean, it sounds like they're planning on paying property taxes,
right?
Specifically talking about it. So, you know, it's hard to argue with. I mean, that actually surprised me. That was more jobs. Maybe I agree on that, but the knock I'd always heard is that they don't actually create that many jobs. Well, 200 to 300 is a pretty good employer.
Yeah, and I hope when they're bringing in all those electrical workers and all those plumbers, that they're union plumbers and union electrical workers. That's what I hope.
And I hope they're just qualified and certified in North Dakotans who can make some money. Hey, coming up on the next show, we're actually going to be speaking about this sort of meshes nicely with this topic, is North Dakota, as of August 1st, has a new law requiring public comment at every meeting. Now, in recent years, we have seen one of the flashpoints when it comes to, shall we say, tumultuous public meetings has been school boards. So we're going to have somebody on from the North Dakota.
Not just somebody, Amy DeCook, the executive director of the North Dakota School Boards Association.
Executive director of the North Dakota School Boards Association. She's going to be on to talk about that law and specifically how they're preparing for it, because it is the law now for a little more than a month now. So that's going to be going on. Remember, you can always leave us a voicemail or send us a text if you want to participate in the show, 701-587-3141. Voicemail or text, just send it. And we're always happy to get the feedback. Also, follow us on all the social media things, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, X. We're at Plain Talk ND. If you want to see our video clips and things like that we produce from the show, it's just another way to engage. Maybe you don't have time to listen to the full show, but you can watch some of the highlights. Really appreciate it. Matt does a great job with those. Thank you so much for listening. We'll talk again. That's it for today on Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. Plain Talk is a production of Forum Communications Company. Got a question, comment, or suggestion? Leave us a voicemail or send us a text message at 701-587-3141. That's 701-587-3141. If you haven't subscribed to Plain Talk yet, you can find us on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform like Spotify or Apple Podcasts. For those of you who are already hooked, give us a rating or review. And don't forget to share or tell a friend. Special thanks to my co-host Chad Oban, and from myself and everyone at Plain Talk, thanks for listening. Find a common enemy. Who does everybody hate? Fargo.
Yep.